The surgeon also called down to the radiology department to instruct them over the phone as well. With all of the excitement over Christmas, the orders were not properly followed, and I was given the oral contrast. Following the CT scan, the radiology tech chose to leave an IV in my arm in case the surgeon could use it for surgery. What he forgot to do was immobilize my arm. This is where the problem started. The IV was placed across the joint, which meant that when I reached up to scratch my head, the vein was torn open. Unbeknownst to anyone at the time, a clot began to form in that vein. After being completely prepped for surgery, the anesthesiologist was going through her standard list of questions with me. One of them being, "Have you had anything to eat or drink in the last 12 hours?" My answer was, no, except for the oral contrast for the CT scan. I was under the impression that the radiology tech knew what he was doing and that it was acceptable to have the contrast in my stomach before surgery. I didn't know any better. The anesthesiologist was shocked that they had given it to me. After careful consideration, it was decided that the surgery would have to be rescheduled. 1 week later, the day before New Year's Eve, the surgery was performed, successfully this time. My gallbladder and appendix were removed. By this point, the clot in my arm, which was yet to be detected, was growing very large. I was in a tremendous amount of pain. In the recovery room, I spoke with the surgeon regarding the pain and swelling in my arm, and was told that it was probably just some inflammation from the IV, and I was instructed to come back to the hospital if it continued to get worse. By the following day, New Year's Eve, the pain and swelling had become noticeably worse, so I was taken back to the hospital. An ultrasound was performed, at which point a 15 centimeters long clot was found. Because the probability of suffering a pulmonary embolism that stems from an upper extremity clot is extremely small, I was instructed to take an aspirin per day and was sent home. For those of you who are unfamiliar with what a pulmonary embolism is, this is when a blood clot in a vein breaks loose and travels to the lungs, where it becomes lodged and blocks the main arteries of the lungs. Oxygenation of the red blood cells becomes difficult and can eventually result in death. On January 1st of 2011, New Year's Day, I did in fact suffer from multiple, bilateral, both lungs, pulmonary emboli. In the emergency room, my blood oxygen saturation percentage dropped into the high 70s, at which point I began losing my vision. An anticoagulant drug was immediately administered via IV to stop the clots from becoming larger. My hospital stay was 3 days in duration, after which point I returned home and began a regimen of Coumadin, an oral anticoagulant drug that I took daily for 3 months. Along with Coumadin come weekly INR checks. INR, or International Normalized Ratio, is a test used to test the clotting tendency of blood.